I just finished listening to this album, Relayer by Yes, for the first time in at least a decade, and what an unbelievable listening experience. I can still remember the first time I heard this album, and it felt like my face was just gonna melt right off my skull. Now, if you don't know this album, I can't wait to tell you about it. Here's a little bit of background. Relayer is the 7th studio album by the British prog rock group Yes. They recorded it in bassist Chris Squire's garage, and they weren't constrained by hourly studio time budgets, so they spent ample time making this record the powerhouse it is. It came out in 1974 following the very successful release of the contentious album Tales from Topographic Oceans. Now, I say contentious because the fan base is pretty divided about whether the album is just way over the top or totally peak Yes. Frankly, I love a lot of Tales, but I'll be honest with you, I skipped through plenty of the album just to get to the good parts. Now, Tales frustrated keyboardist Rick Wakeman so much that he left the band over it, and he went on to make the very excellent solo release, Six Wives of Henry VIII, which I highly recommend if you're not familiar with it. Now, Rick's departure opened an opportunity for a new keyboard player in Yes. At first they recruited Vangelis, but had some concerns about his commitment. And then they landed on Patrick Moraz, who ended up playing keys on Relayer and bringing a jazz fusion influence to the band. Now, when I was a teenager learning how to play guitar, I spent a lot of time playing along with the Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge. I took months to learn Steve Howe's solo guitar pieces, Clap, and Mood for a Day. And these pieces taught me a lot, but they could not have prepared me for Steve's performance on Sound Chaser. The second track on Relayer. The guitar work on this song is simply beyond anything from previous Yes records. And it's not just Steve, the whole band is on fire. Now, Sound Chaser opens up with Patrick Moraz just whizzing up and down what sounds like a tweaked Fender Rhodes, and then Chris Squire and Alan White come in blasting like Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, played at triple tempo and distorted and with the volume just cranked to 11. The performances are so tight and astonishingly fast. This is not the Yes from Long Distance Runaround or Roundabout. This is a band pushing its limits towards redlining. Now, at the 3-minute mark of Sound Chaser is a jaw-dropping guitar solo. That also sounds like something Stravinsky would have written. Steve furiously slides around the neck, covering a lot of territory and playing the only guitar solo I know of that prominently features diminished chords. Now, because I knew so much of his recorded vocabulary before Relayer, I was able to recognize hints of Mood for a Day and Close to the Edge in there, but honestly, this solo is just something else. The whole song is astonishing, and it captivated me as a teenager. I couldn't get enough. I spent hours listening to this song, trying to learn all the guitar parts. I mean, Steve Howe is on fire. And then there's the 22-minute opening track, Gates of Delirium, which has some of the most absurd lyrics you'll ever hear. But the song is really composed very carefully, and I know this is the third time I'm mentioning Stravinsky, but having just listened to Relayer, I can't help but feel like it was heavily inspired by him. I mean, there are so many themes throughout the composition, and they're masterfully woven in and out, just like the motifs of Rite of Spring. Now, the third and final track, To Be Over, feels like it's going to be this long, meandering piece in the style of Tales from Topographic Oceans, but it's actually much more lively and interesting than you might expect. As I listened to the first couple of minutes, I thought, okay, I'll fast forward a little, but it pivots at just the right moments and remains engaging and beautiful. Now, speaking of beauty, there's so much of it across this entire release. The last few minutes of the Gates of Delirium were released as a single called Soon, and the closing chord sequence has this melancholic feel and a quality of Chopin or Rachmaninoff. Relayer's 3 tracks were composed and recorded in parts, and then they were edited together, but for the most part, it flows together rather naturally. Just like Tales and Close to the Edge, there are these incredible melodies and plenty of moments that give me the chills. But the thing about Relayer is that it just doesn't waste time with soundscapes or meaningless vamping. It gets right to the point, and it just wants to blow your brains out. There's no shortage of reminders that it's a product of the mid-1970s. I mean, Patrick Moraz does a great job on the keys, but some of the synths will sound dated to the modern listener. The guitars are also way too loud in some parts of the mix, and at times the album feels like the Steve Howe Show featuring other members of Yes. But nevertheless, I think this is a monumental release, and I really encourage you to check it out. You'll hear influences from so many genres, from country to disco to jazz to 20th century classical to blues to ballad rock. I mean, the album's just astonishing. If you have a music streaming service that shows the lyrics while you listen, check those out too, because some of the words are so vapid and ridiculous, but that's also what makes it great. I mean, here's an excerpt I read to my wife, and she laughed and rolled her eyes. Wars that shout in screams of anguish, power spent passion bespoils our soul receiver. Surely we know, in glory we rise to offer, create our freedom, a word we utter, a word. In the words of Henry F. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, sentimental hogwash. I mean, still, Relayer is a fantastic listen for open ears. Just pay attention to the interactions between the bass and the drums and the frenetic guitar work of Steve Howe, particularly while he's also singing in 3-part harmony. There's the stunning chord experimentation of Patrick Moraz and the passionate vocalisms of the one and only John Anderson. So let me know what you think of this album in the comments. Now, another comment on the lyrics. There's chanting at the end of To Be Over, which, according to one commenter, are not real words being chanted, but nonsense sounds. John Anderson said so himself in a magazine interview back in February 1978. Here are some additional comments from our Club Weird members who support our channel with a small $3 a month donation. If you want to support Make Weird Music, consider joining Club Weird by clicking the join button below the YouTube video player. I'd really appreciate it. Now, Sharon Baker said, Relayer was good, but not nearly as life-changing as the Yes album, Fragile, Close to the Edge, or Tales from Topographic Oceans, which are my favorites. Now, personally, I think those albums had a bigger impact on me than Relayer, but Relayer just really made my jaw drop more than any of those albums. Michael Fisher wrote, Relayer is far and away my favorite Yes album. The Gates of Delirium is a standout track because it actually tells a linear story. It is intensely visual in its composition and execution. Sound Chaser has Moraz pushing this band to its jazz fusion extremes with dazzling results, and Howe's solo in that track is his answer to Jimmy Page's solo in Heartbreaker. Finally, To Be Over is absolutely gorgeous with some of the finest melodic counterpoint Yes ever produced. Now that's a great point about To Be Over. The use of counterpoint in this track is great, but it's also very reminiscent of Gentle Giant's song, 3 Friends, which was released 2 years earlier. The two bands did tour together too, which makes me think there might have been some inspiration going on. To Be Over also has a ton of 1950s country guitar influence, with Steve's slide guitar and the very Les Paul-esque harmonization, so that's super cool. Bill McPhee wrote, Relayer was not my favorite Yes album, Close to the Edge wins that award, but it was very good. I was and am a big Wakeman fan, so I was a bit dismayed when he left. And finally, Michael Patterson wrote, Sound Chaser, as near as jazz fusion, is a great track. Alright, so I'll see you in the comments. Let us know your thoughts on Relayer, especially if you've never heard it before. Is it their best? Is it one of their best? Or is it just too much? I'd love to hear it. See you there. Thanks.